Hi, I'm Dick Wagner. Today's segment is Say It to Sell It. And it's about the things that you say or the things that you should not say in the sales process. We're going to talk about words that waste time and words that potentially damage the sale. And I want to take you out of the dinosaur age and into today's style of selling. Wasted words that are so often repeated in this day and age, and words that we should not use because they serve no purpose. I'm going to read them off to you here, and we'll explain a few of them as we go. But if you're up in front of somebody and you're getting ready to do a presentation, or even a one-on-one, saying thank you for your time today, it's just totally not necessary. It's a total waste of time. It's such a pleasure to be here. You know, chances are really good that that's just routine blah blah blah. You're using filler words, you're using pleasantries that you either don't necessarily feel or that they don't necessarily believe are legit. And then, occasionally there's somebody that wants to start out their interaction by saying, a funny thing happened to me on the way here today. That almost always is the beginning of a really bad or inappropriate joke. We only have a short time together today. That might be what you want to hear your minister say on Sunday morning, but that really serves no purpose in the sales presentation. Also, I'm going to talk to you today about, really, why do you have to do that? Why don't you just cut to the chase and start talking about what you have to talk about? When you're in front of a group and you have to start out your presentation with an apology, I'm sorry that I'm not a professional speaker. Not a good way to interact initially out of the gate with your audience. And the other one that people often say is, in a minute, we're going to get started talking about whatever it is, but I'd first like to, and they go into some other thing. I can picture, but I'd first like to do some housekeeping things and let you know where the men's and ladies' room are. They're out the hall to your left, and then they're the two right-hand doors or whatever. It's like, that's just not the great way to start out your sales presentation. Also, we want to make sure that you are addressing your buyer's pains. And I mean immediately, almost the very first thing that you start talking about is addressing the client's pains. And some of those pains might be, within a hotel situation, keeping heads in beds, or in other words, enhancing their occupancy rates or status in their hotel. And then if you're doing a building walkthrough and identifying controls and shutoffs, that's an ideal thing for your client to use for onboarding training. Part of their pain is to recover quickly when disaster strikes their facility, or keeping the residents comfortable during a disaster event at a nursing home. We're all concerned about productivity and having minimal downtime in our business. Those could easily be the pains of a commercial client. Or in the daycare setting, the health and safety of children. That is a potential pain. And daycare centers are really focused on that. So start addressing those pains right out of the gate. And then in addition to that, you will be speaking with different people, different titles, different positions, different roles or duties within an organization. And as you can imagine, the roles or duties or concerns of an owner are totally different than those of a receptionist. The head of maintenance is worried about fixing a toilet or replacing a leaky faucet or getting a light switch fixed. But the vice president of the operation or a general manager, that's somewhere down his list, but that won't be the primary pain. And so when you're speaking about pains to a client, make sure that you know exactly what their title or role is, because their pains will be different. You also want to make sure that your presentation is extremely clear and precise. Make sure that you choose words that resonate with your buyer. Don't use your own internal industry jargon to talk with a client that isn't familiar with your industry. An example is if the client says, well, what do you do if I have a water loss in my hotel? If you start using your own jargon, well, we're going to bring some air movers and some DEUs in, and we're going to use an extreme extractor to remove the moisture, you're way over the head of your client. You better use the words and language and lingo that matters to your buyer, your customer, not your own industry. Have you been clear in exactly what you're asking them to do? In other words, after your presentation or when your presentation is winding down, you need to be clear with them what you're asking them to do. If you're selling a pre-disaster program, you need to be clear that you're asking them to sign in the agreement promising to call you when a disaster strikes. And they're also going to enable you or facilitate for you to walk the building, probably with the head of maintenance, so you can map and tag or do a full Matterport scan. Did you eliminate information that's not important to them? Are you in your presentation talking about things that are totally irrelevant to them? A good example, if you're doing a one-on-one binder 3-ring prep presentation, the 3-ring manual, and you're talking with a daycare center, they probably aren't too concerned about bed bugs. So although bed bugs is in the manual, you need to either remove it for that client in that presentation, or at least ignore it, skip over it quickly so that it isn't, so you're not talking about information that's totally irrelevant to them. There's an old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. My favorite saying is that it's not your job to make them drink, it's your job to make them thirsty. It's your job to make them so wanting to buy your service or your product that they can't help themselves. It's kind of like having somebody run around the block 3 times on a hot summer day, and then when they get back to the office, believe me, if you have a couple cold bottles of water out there, they're going to drink. Simply because you've made them thirsty. Furthermore, always speak with a positive attitude. And that positive attitude can be straightforward, but positive words give you very powerful results. When you tell them what criteria needs to be met, what is possible to do, and what you can do, that's speaking in the positive. Don't bring up negative things. But if there's going to be something negative that your client is going to throw at you, by golly, bring it up first. And that's where you bring something up with a label on it. For example, they might be concerned or worried about or have objections to all the hoops that they have to go through to have a pre-disaster program for their facility. Or they may have some objection about the amount of work or the things that they have to do. You know, by calling on those types of clients over and over again, you pretty much know what they're going to object to and what they're going to not object to. And if you know, calling on hotels, that they're constantly worried about how much effort they have to put in to the program to implement it, you need to reassure them right out of the gate. And although I've labeled this as a negative, it's not a negative if you address it quickly. It's kind of like, you know what, there's an 800-pound elephant in the room, and everybody keeps quietly walking around the edge of the room, and nobody talks about the 800-pound elephant, although it's pretty obvious that the elephant is there. I wouldn't call that a negative thing that you would talk about. I would call that addressing the 800-pound elephant so nobody's beating around the bush or walking on tippy toes. There are a couple other key points I'd like to make. One is what I call low-level writing. Low-level writing is kind of the way you would write an email or a text message to a buddy, a friend, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, your kids. And that would include things like happy faces or other silly emoticons. Low-level writing would probably include too many words. It will certainly include a lot of fluffy words. Also, when you're sending an email, don't add a motivational thought at the end of your email, and don't overuse exclamation points. When you do these things, it looks like and really is low-level writing, and that's not the kind of writing that you want when you're sending something to a business client. You want to be doing high-level writing. Your email or your text needs to be concise and clear. It needs to be very short sentences. It needs to be in a very direct and clear manner. And it should also be positive. Also, in wrapping up whatever presentation you're doing, try to avoid, and this could even be in an email, try to avoid finally, in conclusion, and in summary. Those are not ideal ways to end a presentation or to end an email. A far better way would be to say, let me leave you with this thought, or that's it except for this one last thing, or, and this is important for you to remember. It's kind of like the leave behind brochure, if you will. It's the takeaway that you want your client or your prospect to literally take away, either mentally or physically, in the interaction via email or face-to-face. Leave them something so it's constantly, they're reminded of it. It's in the way our brain works, is we will certainly remember the one last thing that we were told. Also, in clarifying your conclusion, be direct. In other words, so what are our next steps, John? What would you like our next steps to be, Bill? How would you like to move forward with the program, Scott? By being direct, by specifically clarifying how you'd like or how they'd like you to move forward is really essential to your interaction. In clarifying, especially when they're trying to push it off, when they're trying to push the next interaction with you down the road to next week, next month, after the first of the year, don't let them get away with that. Nail it down even more. It might go something like this. John, you said next week. How does Tuesday morning next week work for you? That's according to my calendar, October 27th. 9 a.m. work? Don't let them just give you a vague next time to visit. Nail it down exactly. Bob, you said next month. How does May 15th work in the morning? That's really nailing it down again. Mary, you said to check back with you in a couple days. I'll stop back to see you in 2 days. That'll be on a Thursday. I'll be in here about 11 a.m. to clarify and finalize everything. When you interact and clarify with your client that way, you're hitting the nail on the head and you're driving that nail home. And that's what you need to be doing in the sales process. So as for me, I hit the wrong key here, folks. As for me, that's all, except for these key points. And like I would want you to do with a client, I just simply want to recap briefly what I've just been talking about for the last 7 or 8 minutes. No more wasted words. Use only the words that are needed and important. Always address their pains, and don't be afraid to address their pains right out of the gate. Know what their pain is for each particular management type or title or role within an organization. Be sure that you present clear and precise direction, instructions, information. Always try to speak in the positive. Know the difference between low-level and high-level writing. Be sure to conclude your presentation properly. When you're ending your visit or your interaction, clarify the conclusion. And that really means nail down not only what the next steps will be, but the date and the time that those next steps will actually happen. Let me leave you, folks, thanks for listening, with this thought. How you say it or how you write it matters in whether you sell it. I'm Dick Wagner. You've been watching the Crest Network, and I appreciate your indulgence. See you next time.